Is your team still struggling with the TRID good faith effect? The TRID 2.0 change that kind of blew up the change circumstances world? If so, you're in luck. Hi there, this is Jared Moyer with Bankers Compliance Consulting. Today, the topic is TRID and the good faith effect, and I'm going to use some illustrations and talk about the concept that TRID 2.0 brought to the table that was really the most complex and challenging thing based on those October 1st, 2018 changes. I'm also going to give you a resource tool at the end of the program. So we need to have a little bit of background here before we can understand how everything kind of works as we get into the concept. First off, when it comes to revising the loan estimate, it works like this. When you encounter a change circumstance, and that change circumstance affects a tolerance-related item, what you have to do is within 3 days of learning of the change circumstance at hand, what you have to do is issue a revised loan estimate based on that change circumstance. And in doing so, if you do that within 3 days, it resets the tolerance baseline for those fees associated with that change circumstance at hand. Now, under TRID 1.0, the original rule, it worked like this. When you encountered that change circumstance, you only adjusted those things that were affected by the specific change circumstance at hand. I need you all to flush that way of thinking. That's not the way it's done anymore. Going forward under TRID 2.0, when you are going to revise a loan estimate based on a legitimate change circumstance, not only do you need to update the information related directly with the change circumstance at hand, everything else also has to be the most up-to-date and accurate as it can be at the time the disclosure goes out. In other words, no more just updating the information that's related to the change circumstance at hand. If there's other information that has come into your possession since the last loan estimate went out, you'll also update that information on the loan estimate that you're revising to reset the tolerance baseline based on the change circumstance that's in front of you. Now, when we do that, things get really complicated because at the end of the day, what happens is you issue this revised loan estimate based on the best information available, including the information related to the change circumstance at hand. And the idea is the entire 3-page loan estimate is the most accurate from top to bottom, from section 1 to the last section on the bottom of page 3, as it can be at the time it goes out. The however is, you can only use the information that you updated related to the change circumstance at hand for accuracy tolerance comparisons. In other words, even though the rest of that information on that piece of paper is deemed to be accurate, if it wasn't associated with the change circumstance that caused the redisclosure, that information can't be used for accuracy purposes. And I know what some of you are thinking, you're going, what in the world did he just say? And how in the world am I supposed to apply that? Well, again, you're in luck. I'm going to show you a resource tool that I'm going to share with everyone. You'll have the ability to go and download this after the program, and where you'll be able to walk through it again and again, maybe shut the doors and listen to it, and so that you understand fully the concept that went into effect actually back on October 1st of 2018. So here's a glance at the resource tool. Now I know just at a glance you're going, what in the world is that? It looks complicated and you're already wanting to cash out. Stay with me. Trust me, at the conclusion of this, I think you'll have a better understanding. I can't promise that your system, your software is going to be able to do it, but I understand, but I do know that you'll understand it and you'll have a better way to explain it to your team and the people that are providing you your loan origination software to do the things that are necessary to comply with this requirement. So this is what we're going to walk through. We're going to walk through from left to right. The dates that I'm going to use are just general dates. They're not necessarily anything I picked for any specific reason, but I'm going to walk through from left to right and explain to you the good faith effect on revised loan estimates and closing disclosures. So the first thing that's going to happen, moving from left to right, is on January 5th, I issued a loan estimate and I made a mistake. I forgot the appraisal. Now, right out of the gates, what we know based on the TRID rules is that I can't charge the borrower for that appraisal. I failed to disclose it. That's going to be a tolerance cure I'm going to give when we get to the closing disclosure. I'll explain how that's done when we get there. Now, in this circumstance, my loan estimate goes out before the bank gets into their possession a purchase agreement. Because what I'm going to show you in the next column, January 8th, is we actually get the purchase agreement in our possession. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to date stamp that thing. We care the date that it came in. Why? Because when auditors and examiners open up our loan file, they should be able to tell that the information on the purchase agreement did or did not affect the original loan estimate that went out. In other words, if it came in before the original loan estimate goes out, then we would expect the lender to have done their homework and read through the purchase agreement, and then anything that is affected on the loan estimate by that purchase agreement should have made its way to the loan estimate. In this case, it comes in after the purchase or after the loan estimate that was delivered on January 5th, meaning that we're going to still care. We're going to date stamp it. We're going to read through it to see if there's anything that would be a legitimate change circumstance that would affect a tolerance item. Now, I did the homework already. I read through the purchase agreement. There's nothing in here that would equate to a legitimate change circumstance where I would need to issue a revised disclosure so that I could reset tolerances. So we're just going to note that it came in on the 8th. Now, that's important because of the new good faith requirement that TRID 2.0 brought to the table. If we encounter another legitimate change circumstance down the road and we reset tolerances, this new information that came in on January 8th will have to make its way to the next revised disclosure if we encounter one down the road. Now, that's just what's going to happen. On January 14th, what we learn is that the borrower wants to increase the loan amount. They want to go from 100 to 125,000. So it's a borrower requested change circumstance. Now, at my bank, what we do is we charge a percentage-based origination fee, 1% of the loan amount. We want to be able to capture the additional origination fee income that comes with the borrower increasing their loan amount from 100,000 to 125,000. That's an extra $250 of income. Okay, we're going to try and get that. To do so, we're going to have to reissue the loan estimate, okay, in connection with this change circumstance within 3 days of learning of it. Now, we're going to have to revise those things directly associated with the change circumstance at hand so that we can reset the tolerances associated with those items. Things like the origination fee, that's a percentage of the loan amount. Things like the title insurance that's based on the loan amount, the lender's title insurance. Those are all things tied to a tolerance that we want to reset the baseline based on the information that was brought to the table. Now, we also forgot the appraisal back on the original loan estimate. We're still not going to go and add that back. We're also going to ignore the fact that we're going to have to pay for that charge. We're going to show that all when we get to the closing disclosure. Okay? So at this point on January 14th, we're going to address those things directly associated with the change circumstance at hand, everything to do with the loan amount. But we also have to update anything in that purchase agreement that came in January 8th and add that to our January 14th loan estimate as well. And you'll see that's what those paragraphs are walking you through on this form when you download it. And again, you'll want to go back and read that. Now on January 18th, we get the actual bill for title insurance. It's not a change circumstance. It's just they've sent us the actual bill for what the title insurance is going to be. Do we care? The answer is absolutely yes. We're going to date stamp the day we got the bill for the actual title insurance. The reason we care, if we ever have to provide another loan estimate, we're going to have to update from what was the estimate for title insurance to the exactment for title insurance based on this new final bill that came in. It's not a change circumstance. There's no new information other than the final bill, but it is something that we're going to have to account for if we have to ever issue a revised loan estimate. And that's just what's going to happen. January 22nd comes along. We encounter a legitimate change circumstance. The appraiser goes out, they get all the information so they can do their appraisal, and they identify that there's something wrong with the structure. There's a hole in the roof or something like that. And they come back to the bank and say, all right, we've done the appraisal. This hole in the roof has to be repaired before I'll sign off on the appraisal. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to drive back out there and do another inspection. And I charge $100 to do a re-inspection when it comes to repairs that need to be made to buildings that I'm doing appraisals on. And the bank then wants to be able to pass that $100 inspection fee, re-inspection fee, on to the borrower. Well, that's a change circumstance, learning of the new information, the hole in the roof. Within 3 days of learning of that additional $100 inspection fee, we're going to have to issue a revised loan estimate within 3 days to reset that tolerance baseline. Okay, so we're going to do that. But what we also now have to do is take the January 18th title insurance bill, we have to update that on this loan estimate. Now here's where it gets a little bit complicated. You're going to update the title insurance bill from the 18th on the January 22nd loan estimate. That's going to make it the most accurate it can be when it goes out the door. However, that updated final title insurance number that you use on the January 22nd loan estimate cannot be used for tolerance purposes. For tolerance purposes, you're going to go back to one of the previous loan estimates. Okay, it would actually be the loan or the January 14th loan estimate. That'd be the latest change circumstance related estimate for title insurance. Okay? You would not use the updated number on the 18th bill. So that's what's going on in the January 22nd column. Now we're ready to close. Now there's a lot going on at closing. The first thing I want to let you know is in that first paragraph in the January 31st column, the borrower has chosen at the last minute that they don't want to escrow. And our bank has said, okay, if you don't want to escrow, we won't make you escrow, but we charge a thing called an escrow waiver fee. Borrower says, yeah, I'll pay the escrow waiver fee. And so in order to be able to charge that escrow waiver fee, which is a 0% tolerance, we have to issue a revised closing disclosure. In this case, it's going to be the closing disclosure that's going to show that fee. And I'll explain how this all works in a minute. This is the effect of the black hole closing for TRID. You can use a closing disclosure to affect a changed circumstance. And so I mentioned revised closing disclosure. That's not what this is. This is the closing disclosure. We can show the escrow waiver fee for the first time ever on the closing disclosure, as long as it's within 3 days of learning that the borrower doesn't want to escrow and that there will be a fee for that. And so that's what you'll see in that first paragraph in the January 31st column. Now, the next thing that I want to mention is in the second paragraph in that column, one of the things that causes a lot of confusion is the cash to close table on page 3 of the closing disclosure. That cash to close table has a loan estimate column and a final column. The loan estimate column, the numbers there come from the last piece of paper provided by the lender. In other words, the January 22nd loan estimate numbers are what you will use in the loan estimate column on page 3 of the closing disclosure in cash to close. It is not used at all for tolerances. It's simply numbers taken from a piece of paper and they get put in the cash to close section, and you compare the closing disclosure to it, but not for tolerance purposes. So that's the second paragraph that you'll see in the January 31st column. Now, the next item, for tolerance purposes, we're going to be comparing our closing disclosure numbers back to a number of different disclosures, loan estimates, and even closing disclosures for that matter. This is where it gets complicated. The appraisal fee, it's actually going to show up on our closing disclosure. And we're going to do it in the paid by others column. Okay, you're going to compare it back to the original loan estimate, and that's why you're doing the paid for by others column. You can't pass it on to the borrower because you failed to disclose it. The paid for by others column is your cure to that tolerance error. Okay, that's why you're going to disclose it there. The origination fee, that you're going to compare not back to the original loan estimate. It's going to go back to the January 14th loan estimate. That's where we had the changed circumstance where we increased the origination fee based on the loan amount going up. The inspection fee, well, that doesn't show up on any of the loan estimates until the January 22nd loan estimate. So the closing disclosure inspection fee for the appraiser having to go out and re-inspect, that's going to be compared back to our January 22nd loan estimate. Now, at this point, just at a glance at the screen, you're going to notice that we've compared our closing disclosure back to each of the 3 loan estimates. We're not quite done yet. Okay? First off, the lender's title insurance, we're going to go back to the January 14th loan estimate. Why? Because the 5th would have our original estimate. We had to change circumstance. The 22nd would have the actual. Okay? That we can't use for accuracy purposes. For accuracy purposes, we take the January 14th. And then we have something very interesting happen. Okay? In the January 31st column, the first thing I hit you with was the borrower didn't want to escrow. You charge a fee for that. You do that within 3 days of learning that they don't want to escrow. We're now going to compare the closing disclosure to itself. I know that seems odd, but that escrow waiver fee does not show up on any of the loan estimates. The changed circumstance was affected by the closing disclosure that you issued and was in their hands at least 3 days before closing. In this case, you're comparing the closing disclosure to itself. And then all other fees and charges back to the original January 5th loan estimate. This is a concept that many are still struggling with, the good faith effect on revised disclosures. And it's not just limited to loan estimates, because as you can see in our January 31st column, closing disclosures are also affected by this. Okay? Most systems are still struggling to deal with this. Okay? Keep working at it, take notes along the way, write your story. If this is something you're hearing for the first time and you want more in-depth analysis on this, I'd love to invite you and your team to join us for an upcoming webinar that is the TRID, Change Circumstances and Revised Disclosures. We're going to be spending 2 hours on those issues that will include the information that you see on the screen relating to the good faith effect. We'd love to have you join us. And as always, we'll be providing it to you in a plain English setting. I look forward to seeing you. Thanks.